So we're here at the CCA workbench,
Yes, sir.
and maybe Santa Claus will bring you one of those 25.
Maybe, never know. I
Just
need
a matter
one.
of whether you're good or
I'm
bad.
always good. I'm a good fella.
All right, good fella. Tell me about some.
Well, we're
all this
talking about
stuff.
creature baits. You know, last week on the Texas show, I mentioned one of them. We had one out, and we mentioned it, and you said, "Ooh, that's pretty neat." Well, I said, "Well, let's go ahead and talk about catching fish with them." And the very first creature bait was probably the lizard. Bass don't like lizards. Lizards, for some reason, piss bass off, and they eat a lot of lizards. And that was probably the very first creature bait. You know, it's a weird looking bait. And what happened is after that, they kind of got bigger and weirder. You know, some of this stuff no bass has ever seen before. Nothing in the water ever looks like it, and no human's ever seen it before, unless you're some guy making monsters for a TV movie or something. I mean, look at these things. So they have all these paddles and ridges and rings on them. And what these things are designed to do is they're designed to move a lot of water. And when the fish are down really deep, you know, trying to stay cool, or they're up in some really heavy brush, this thing is a big creature that moves through the water, and with all those little rings and paddles and stuff, it's moving the water. So even in dark water, they can sense that thing being there, and hopefully they'll try to eat it. So these things are fished in mainly like 3 or 4 different ways. You can fish them on a jig head, a football jig head that's like kind of like a punching lure. And a puncher is something that you want to use to get through heavy vegetation on the top. And some of these things will get, you know, 1.5 ounces to even to 2 ounce jig head to punch through heavy hydrilla or, you know, real thick grass and stuff. If you know that there's a pocket underneath there that you want to get that bait through. Or you could fish it Carolina style. Now this is how a lot of guys will fish them here, and they'll get this thing in the summertime, and they'll get that thing down deep, and they'll have the Carolina rigged, and they'll have the big creature bait sitting up above the weight as it crawls on the bottom, fishing just like a plastic worm, or not. Or not.
And then what's with the chatter?
Well, that's a chatterbait, and it's kind of like a penetrator too, and you can jig that. You know, you put a big a bug on the back of the chatterbait, and when you put it down into, if you're flipping it up under a dock or something, you give it lift that rod tip real quick, and it'll and then it falls down again, and then it'll fall down. And a lot of times, most of the time, they'll eat this thing when it punches through. The initial punch through, when it comes through, that's usually when they'll get it. You jig it a couple times, and then you move on to the next spot. What you'll do is you'll get your nose of your boat right up into the junk almost. And guys with a good silent trolling motor will probably catch a lot more. They'll get right up in there, and they'll throw the little coffee cup sized holes in the cover and drop it straight down, and you just get
That's
real.
one of the things that has made the dual power poles change the way these guys flip and pitch. And
I have a hard time doing it because I don't have any of that on my boat. I don't have a power pole. I don't have any a trolling motor or anything. I do a lot of drifting and topwater plugging. So this is all kind of a new thing for me. I don't like, it's kind of a slow thing, but the guys are catching a lot bigger fish than I am, even on my topwater stuff. These are the kind of things that the guys who are winning all the big bass tournaments are using these days. So and they're using really heavy line too, 65-pound test braid stuff that, you know, I used grouper fishing.
Right.
Well, they're using that to catch these, and they'll tie straight to the hook with that braid because they're in all that heavy stuff. They don't really care if the fish can see it or not because it's usually a reaction bite. That thing punches through and he wants to eat it. And once he gets that in there, you hit them hard and you try to get their head up because they're in the stuff that he's in there because nothing else is in there.
Right.
And there's all kinds of other stuff for him to do the Houdini and put that hook on.
Right.
So when you get his head coming up, you got to crank it. So they're using really stout, long rods that they can lift those fish out of that cover. And once they get their head up, they're just cranking, sliding them across that cover. Because if he gets his head and it goes back down on you, he's going to Houdini you. And
yeah, bass is like that grouper.
Yeah,
if he
he's going to get off.
Look over his shoulder and see the hole where he wants to go.
He's done. He's already there.
Yeah, he's already there. Speaking of already there, Bree is standing by to give us our next reporter.
Yes, I am.